This is not a story about a serial killer. This is a story about an enforcer of marital contracts that no one ever agreed to. In 1983, men in expensive suits began vanishing without a trace from Manhattan bars. They were found hanged, poisoned, drowned. The investigation's verdict was always the same: depression, accident, suicide. But every single corpse was missing one small detail: a wedding ring. One woman, Sienna Lorenzo, developed an unusual hobby: collecting men's rings as proof of guilt. Each ring in her cedar box is an entire life shattered by lies, and a death sentence she carried out herself. How did a librarian manage to fool New York's best detectives? And why was Detective Reid so certain that a woman's hand was behind the 8 suicides? Part 1. The Noose That Whispered Sorry. The story begins with Central Park, just before dawn on October 12, 1983. A jogger named Raymond Tate nearly collided with the body swinging gently from the thick branch of an ancient pin oak near the Ramble. The man's shoes dangled 18 inches above the leaf-strewn path. His face was the color of wet slate, tongue slightly protruding between blue lips. A folded sheet of hotel stationery had been pinned to the lapel of his charcoal suit with a simple gold tie clip. The handwriting was careful, almost feminine. "I couldn't live with what I did to her. Forgive me." Signed simply, Kyle. NYPD arrived within 20 minutes. Detectives photographed the scene before cutting him down. No signs of struggle. No defensive wounds. The knot was textbook hangman's, no amateur slipknot. Toxicology would come later, but the preliminary ruling leaned toward suicide. Another married man cracking under guilt. It happened in this city every week. Except Raymond Tate, the jogger, kept staring at the dead man's left hand. The wedding band was gone, cleanly removed. No tan line yet. Across town, in a 4th-floor walk-up on East 78th Street, Siobhan Sienna Lorenzo poured black coffee into a chipped mug that read, "World's Okayest Librarian." She was 31, tall for an Italian-American woman of her generation, with hair the color of burnt umber that she never quite bothered to tame. Her eyes were the pale green of sea glass, eyes that made men confess things they hadn't planned to say. She unfolded yesterday's Post and skimmed the Metro section. Nothing yet. Good. The body wouldn't make front page until the medical examiner confirmed it wasn't foul play. She liked that delay. It gave the wives time to feel the first cold ripple of doubt before the newspapers turned their husbands into tragic headlines. Sienna had grown up in Bensonhurst, daughter of a longshoreman who drank rye and a mother who prayed the rosary in 3 languages. At 19, she married Anthony Tony Moretti because he promised to take her out of Brooklyn. 8 years later, she found the receipts: motels in Jersey, dinners she had never eaten, perfume that wasn't hers. Tony left with half the savings and a new girlfriend who called herself Starla. Sienna kept the apartment. The name Lorenzo, her maternal grandmother's maiden name, she legally changed it the day the divorce was final. And something colder than grief. She began reading, obsessively. True crime paperbacks from the library's discard cart, forensic magazines smuggled home in her canvas tote, yellowed articles about women who waited decades to poison cheating husbands. She never cried anymore. Instead, she cataloged. Every betrayal had a signature, she decided. Every man who strayed left a private language only the betrayed could read. 3 months ago, she tested that theory. Kyle Brenner had been easy. 42, regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical firm, gold cufflinks, laugh too loud at his own jokes. She met him at McSorley's on a Thursday happy hour. He wore no ring. Most of them didn't when they hunted, but the pale circle on his finger gave him away. She let him buy her a pint of dark ale, listened to him complain about his crazy wife who didn't understand pressure, let his knee brush hers under the scarred wooden table. By closing time, he was telling her how much he hated going home. She suggested her place. "Just coffee," she said, smiling the way women are taught to smile when they mean the opposite. In her narrow bedroom, she asked him to confess. Not dramatically, just quietly, while she traced the line of his jaw with one finger. He talked for 40 minutes. Names, dates, hotels, how he told his wife he loved her while still smelling of someone else. When he finished, tears in his eyes, he reached for her. She slipped the belt from his trousers instead. It took 4 minutes. She had practiced the knot on a pillow for weeks. Afterward, she removed the ring, his fingers were still warm, and pinned the note she had typed the night before on an old Olivetti she kept in the closet. She walked him to the Ramble at 3 a.m. in his own car, parked 2 blocks away, positioned him on a milk crate she had brought from home, looped the rope over the branch, kicked the crate aside. She kept the ring in a small cedar box under her bed, next to a Polaroid of Tony and Starla she had taken from his wallet the day he left. Now, standing at her kitchen window watching the early light hit the brick across the street, Sienna felt the familiar hum under her ribs. Not guilt, not remorse. Power. She opened her day planner, neat, looping handwriting, and circled next Thursday. Another bar. Another man who thought he was invisible. She had already chosen the method. Something different this time. Something that would make the newspapers call it accident instead of suicide. Sienna sipped her coffee and smiled at her own reflection in the glass. The city kept producing liars, and she had learned how to answer them. Part 2. Confession before the belt. The neon sign above McSorley's flickered like a dying heartbeat. Old Ale House, Estaint 1854. Thursday, November 17th, 1983. Rain had turned the sidewalks of East Village into black mirrors. Sienna Lorenzo pushed through the heavy wooden door at 9:42 p.m., shaking droplets from her charcoal wool coat. She wore the same burgundy dress she'd worn the night she met Kyle Brenner. Simple, high-necked, sleeves long enough to hide the faint rope burns she'd practiced into calluses on her palms. She chose the same corner booth, ordered the same dark ale. Waited. At 10:17 he walked in. Darius Frost, 48, senior partner at Hargrove, Klein & Associates. 6'2", silver at the temples, the kind of man who still wore 3-piece suits after hours because he believed the world noticed. No wedding ring tonight, but the ghost of one was there. Faint indentation, no tan. He scanned the room the way men who cheat do. Quick, guilty, hungry. Their eyes met over the rim of her glass. She smiled first. Small, inviting, dangerous. He crossed the sawdust floor in 6 strides. Mind if I join you? Every other seat looks like it's been claimed by ghosts. Ghosts don't pay for drinks, she said. You do. He laughed, too loud, too practiced, and slid in across from her. Within 15 minutes, he was telling her about the pressure of closing a merger, the long nights at the office, how his wife, Meredith, didn't understand ambition anymore. Sienna listened the way a priest listens, head tilted, eyes soft, never interrupting. She let him order her a second pint, let his fingers brush hers when he passed the glass. By 11:40, the bar was thinning. Darius leaned closer. You live nearby? "Close enough," she murmured. "But I don't bring strangers home unless they tell me something true first." He blinked. "True?" She traced the rim of her glass with one fingernail. "Everyone carries secrets, especially men who take off their rings before happy hour." His Adam's apple moved. He glanced toward the door, then back at her. Something in her gaze pinned him like a moth to a cork. I've made mistakes," he said quietly. "More than once." "Tell me." He talked for 23 minutes. Names of paralegals, hotel rooms on the Upper West Side, birthdays he missed because he was working late, how he still kissed Meredith goodnight and felt nothing, how he hated himself for it but couldn't stop. Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes. He wiped them away with the back of his hand like a boy caught stealing. When he finished, he reached across the table for her wrist. She caught his hand instead, turned it palm up, studied the faint white circle where the ring should be. "Come with me," she said. Her apartment was 12 minutes away by cab. Darius paid the fare without looking at the meter. Inside, the place smelled of old books and cedar. She lit a single lamp in the living room, left the bedroom dark. "Sit," she told him. He sat on the edge of the sofa like a man waiting for judgment. She knelt in front of him, slid his belt from the loops with deliberate slowness. His breath hitched. He thought he knew what came next. He was wrong. She looped the leather once around his neck, not tight, yet. "You said you hated yourself," she whispered. "Prove it." His eyes widened. "What?" "Say it again. Everything." Louder. He stammered through the confession a second time, voice cracking. She tightened the belt notch by notch while he spoke. When the words ran dry, she pulled hard. It took 6 minutes. No struggle worth noting. He clawed once at her forearms, then went limp. She waited another 10 to be sure. Check the pulse. Nothing. She removed his watch, a gift from Meredith engraved on the back, his cufflinks, and finally the thin gold chain he wore under his shirt. Another present from his wife, she guessed. She left the body slumped on the couch while she typed the note on her Olivetti. "Meredith, I'm sorry. I never deserved you. D." She pinned it to his lapel with one of his own cufflinks. At 2:17 a.m., she drove his Lincoln Town Car to the Henry Hudson Parkway near the 79th Street boat basin. She positioned him behind the wheel, engine running, windows cracked, exhaust pipe feeding into the cabin through a garden hose she'd bought that afternoon at a hardware store on Amsterdam. Classic carbon monoxide suicide. The newspapers would call it despair. The wife would call it guilt. Before she left, she slipped the wedding ring from his finger, warm still, and dropped it into the cedar box beside Kyle's. Back home by 4:03 a.m., she showered until the water ran cold, stood naked in front of the full-length mirror on the closet door, traced the fresh bruises on her forearms, smiled. She felt taller, sharper, cleaner. Thursday was 6 days away. She already knew the next bar, the next face, the next lie she would make him speak before the end. The city kept producing husbands who forgot their vows, and Sienna Lorenzo was keeping score. Part 3. Water remembers every lie. The Hudson smelled of diesel and dead leaves that December morning in 1983. A police launch fished the body out near the 125th Street Pier at 7:14 a.m. on the 23rd. Darius Frost, still in his charcoal pinstripe, coat pockets weighted with river stones he hadn't put there himself. The medical examiner called it accidental drowning, high blood alcohol, slip on wet concrete. Classic winter tragedy for a man who worked too hard and drank too much after hours. No note this time, no belt marks, just water in the lungs and a pale band on the left ring finger that made the widow, Meredith Frost, sob harder when they handed her the effects bag. Sienna read about it on page 14 of the Daily News 2 days later. She clipped the article with pinking shears and tucked it into the cedar box beside the 2 rings. 3 now. 3 liars quieted. She waited until after New Year's. The city was still hungover from champagne and resolutions nobody kept. On January 11, 1984, she walked into The Dead Poet on Upper West Side, a narrow bar where professors and doctors pretended they weren't married when the lights were low. Eldridge Vander noticed her immediately. 51, cardiologist at Mount Sinai. Wire-rimmed glasses, salt and pepper beard trimmed like he still cared what his wife thought. He wore the ring tonight, gold band thick enough to mean something. That made it sweeter. He bought her a gin and tonic without asking. She accepted without smiling too wide. They talked for an hour. He told her about the 16-hour shifts, the malpractice suits, the way his wife, Claudia, had stopped asking when he'd be home. "She thinks I'm saving lives," he said, voice thick with scotch. "I'm just delaying the inevitable." Sienna leaned in. "Tell me about the ones you don't save." He laughed once, then stopped when he saw her eyes. He talked. A nurse in pediatrics. A resident who cried after the first time. A patient's daughter who sent him Polaroids. Dates, hotels. How he wrote prescriptions for Viagra and told Claudia it was for his blood pressure. When the bar closed, she suggested her place again. "I have better scotch," she said, and fewer questions. In her kitchen, she poured him a double. Macallan she'd never opened. Then another. While he drank, she slipped into the bathroom, crushed 6 10-milligram diazepam tablets she'd taken from the medicine cabinet of a neighbor who died the previous summer. She mixed the powder into his 3rd glass with a spoon handle. He never tasted it. They moved to the sofa. He tried to kiss her. She let him for exactly 17 seconds, then pulled back. "Tell me again," she whispered. "Everything. Like you're confessing to God." He did, slurring now, eyes glassy. He listed more names, more nights, more lies he told Claudia while she waited up with cold dinners. When his head lolled, she helped him lie down, covered him with an Afghan, waited. At 3:42 a.m., his breathing shallowed to nothing. Heart stopped quietly, the way bad hearts do when they're helped along. She arranged the scene. Empty bottle of pills on the coffee table. She'd emptied the rest down the toilet. His own prescription pad beside it with a forged scrawl for stress relief. No note. Doctors rarely left them. The shame was private. She drove his Mercedes to Riverside Park at 4:50 a.m., parked near the 96th Street overlook, dragged him to the railing, pushed him over into the black water 30 feet below. The current took him fast. She watched until the ripples smoothed. Back home, she added his ring to the box. It was heavier than the others, engraved inside, "To E from C, forever." She laughed once, short and sharp. 2 weeks later, she chose the 3rd. Orson Kane, 46, investment banker at Goldman Sachs. Met him at the Oak Room in the Plaza on February 9th, 1984. He was drinking martinis alone, tie loosened, staring at his reflection in the bar mirror like he didn't recognize the man looking back. He bought her dinner without preamble, filet mignon, a bottle of Bordeaux. Over dessert, he told her about the mistress in Tribeca, the apartment he paid for in cash, the way he lied to his wife Penelope about late meetings. He showed her a Polaroid of the other woman, blonde, younger, smiling like she believed the promises. Sienna kept the photo when he went to the restroom. That night in her apartment, she cooked for him. Lamb chops with rosemary from the windowsill pot, red wine laced with nothing. Tonight she wanted him lucid until the end. Afterward, on the rug in front of the fireplace, she straddled him. Let him think he was winning. Then she reached for the silk scarf she'd left on the armchair, Hermes, a gift from her mother years ago. She wrapped it once, twice. "Tell Penelope you're sorry," she said softly. He tried to laugh, thought it was a game. She pulled. 4 minutes. His face purpled, eyes bulged. He clawed at the silk. She held steady. When it was done, she removed the ring, the watch, the cufflinks, dressed him in his overcoat, carried him down the back stairs to the alley behind the building, left him propped against the dumpster with his wallet emptied. Mugging gone wrong, they'd say. The newspapers called it a random crime, another body in the city that ate its own. Sienna sat on her fire escape that night, cedar box open on her lap. 5 rings now. She ran her thumb over the engravings. Promises nobody kept. The next bar was already in her planner. Another face waiting to confess. Another lie the water, or the belt, or the pills, or the silk would remember forever. She closed the box, locked it, smiled into the dark. Part 4. The Dinner That Never Ended. February 23rd, 1984. Snow had stopped falling by dusk, leaving Manhattan wrapped in a thin, brittle silence. Sienna Lorenzo stood at the butcher block in her kitchen, slicing lamb shoulder into neat medallions. The radio played low, WNEW-FM, Billy Joel crooning Uptown Girl. She hummed along without smiling. Tonight the apartment smelled of garlic, rosemary, and something sharper underneath. Anticipation. Orson Kane arrived at 7:32 p.m. sharp, carrying a bottle of Chateau Margaux he'd bragged about in the Oak Room the week before. He wore a navy pinstripe suit, no overcoat. Said he'd left it in the car because the night felt too good to cover up. She took the wine, kissed him once on the cheek, and led him to the dining alcove where 2 candles burned in mismatched brass holders. They ate slowly. Filet wrapped in prosciutto, roasted fingerling potatoes, a simple arugula salad she dressed with lemon and olive oil. He complimented everything, told her she cooked like someone who understood hunger. She poured more wine and listened. Halfway through the second bottle, he loosened his tie. "Penelope thinks I'm at a client dinner in Midtown," he said, laughing softly at his own lie. "She's probably folding laundry right now, waiting for me to call and say I'll be late again." Sienna set her fork down. "Tell me about her." He did. How they met at Columbia in '59. How she typed his thesis while pregnant with their first. How the children were grown now, 2 boys at boarding school, and the house in Scarsdale felt too big. How he'd started seeing a woman named Elise in Tribeca because the spark went out years ago. He pulled the Polaroid from his wallet, the same one he'd shown her before, and slid it across the table. Blonde, mid-20s, laughing in a red dress. Sienna studied it for a long moment, then slipped it into her apron pocket. "Does she know you're married?" she asked. Orson shrugged. "She knows what she needs to know." Sienna stood, cleared the plates, returned with dessert, chocolate mousse she'd made that afternoon, and 2 small glasses of port. She sat closer this time, let her knee rest against his under the table. "Tell me the worst lie you ever told her," she said quietly. He hesitated. Then the words came, slow at first, then faster. The nights he claimed overtime while he was in Elise's loft. The birthday he missed because he was stuck in traffic. The time Penelope found lipstick on his collar and he blamed the dry cleaner. He spoke like a man unburdening himself at last, eyes shining with something between relief and shame. When he finished, she touched his cheek. "You're tired of lying," she said. He nodded, reached for her. She let him pull her onto his lap, let him kiss her neck, her collarbone. His hands moved under her dress. She whispered against his ear, "Close your eyes. Trust me." He did. She reached behind her to the sideboard, fingers closing around the silk Hermes scarf she'd left folded there. In one smooth motion, she looped it around his throat, once, twice, and pulled. His eyes snapped open. Hands flew to the silk. He bucked, chair scraping backward. She braced her knees against his hips, using her weight to pin him. His face darkened, red, then purple. Veins stood out on his forehead. A wet gurgle escaped his lips. She held steady, counting silently. 1 minute. 2. 3. His struggles slowed. Hands dropped. Body sagged. She waited another full minute before loosening the scarf. Checked the carotid. Nothing. She stood, breathing hard but even. Dragged him to the floor, careful not to knock over the candles, and arranged the scene. Wallet emptied, pockets turned out. A shallow cut on his forehead from falling against the table edge. She wiped the table, washed the dishes, left only 2 wine glasses, one with his prints, one clean. The port bottle stayed half full. At 11:19 p.m., she carried him down the service stairs in a fireman's hold. Thank God for the weightlifting she'd started after Tony left. And propped him in the alley behind the building beside a row of overflowing dumpsters. She scattered a few dollar bills nearby. Mugging gone wrong. A banker in the wrong place. She walked the 8 blocks home through the snow-dusted streets, coat collar turned up, scarf tucked deep in her pocket. The next morning, the Post ran a 2-column story on page 7. Wall Street exec slain in apparent robbery. No mention of the missing ring. No mention of the dinner that never ended. Sienna clipped the article, tucked it beside the others in the cedar box. 6 rings now. 6 promises broken and collected. Across town, in the 19th Precinct squad room, Detective Annabel Reid stared at a corkboard that was starting to fill. Kyle Brenner, hanged. Darius Frost, carbon monoxide. Eldridge Vander, drowning after pills. Orson Kane, mugging, but the wallet was barely touched. Credit cards still there. She pinned the latest photo, Orson's driver's license, smiling in better days. Underneath, she wrote in red marker, "Married. Ring missing." She stepped back. 4 dead men in 4 months. All husbands, all with pale bands on their fingers. All last seen in bars on the Upper East or Upper West. Annabel rubbed her temples. It could still be coincidence, but coincidences didn't smell this wrong. She pulled the phone toward her and dialed the ME's office. Asked for talk screens on Vander again. Asked if anyone had checked the handwriting on Brenner's suicide note against known samples. Then she opened her notebook to a fresh page. At the top, she wrote one word in block letters. Huntress. She didn't know why yet, but it felt right.
Okay.
Sienna, meanwhile, sat at her kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee. She opened her day planner, circled March 15th. Another bar, another face. The city kept serving them up, and the dinners kept ending the same way.
Okay.
Part 5. Shadows. Reading the obituaries. March 1984 arrived cold and suspicious. The 19th Precinct squad room smelled of burnt coffee and cigarette smoke that clung to the walls like regret. Detective Annabel Reid stood in front of the corkboard that had grown teeth over the winter. 4 photographs pinned in a crooked line. Kyle Brenner, Darius Frost, Eldritch Vander, Orson Kane. Beneath each, a timeline of last sightings, last drinks, last lies told to wives who now slept alone. Annabel had stopped calling them coincidences 3 weeks ago. She taped a new clipping to the board. Orson's Post article circled in red. "Mugging my ass," she muttered. The wallet had been rifled, but not taken. Credit cards untouched. Cash scattered like an afterthought. And the ring, always the ring, missing. She'd pulled records. All 4 men had worn wedding bands the day they died. None were recovered. She opened her notebook to the page labeled Huntress and added a 5th bullet. Rings taken post-mortem. Trophy? The phone rang. ME's office. Tox on Vander came back clean for everything except the diazepam he'd supposedly prescribed himself. But the levels were inconsistent, too high for self-medication, too even for accidental overdose, and the handwriting on the script pad didn't quite match his usual flourish. Forgery, maybe. Subtle, but there. Annabel hung up and stared at the board. She needed a pattern in the bars. She needed a face. Across the city, Sienna Lorenzo walked the aisles of the New York Public Library's main branch on 5th Avenue. She wore a charcoal skirt suit, hair pinned in a low chignon, her invisible look. She reshelved books in the true crime section, fingers lingering on spines. The Poisoner's Handbook, Women Who Kill, The Art of the Perfect Alibi. She wasn't researching anymore. She was confirming. At lunch, she sat on the steps outside, eating a tuna sandwich from a paper bag, watching couples pass. A man in a Brooks Brothers coat kissed his wife goodbye too quickly, checked his watch, headed towards Midtown. Sienna noted the direction, filed it away. That evening, she met Lucas Montgomery at the Ginger Man on 36th Street. 43. High school English teacher at Dalton, married 12 years, 2 daughters. He wore the ring tonight, plain gold, no engraving. He ordered a pint of Guinness and a plate of shepherd's pie he barely touched. They talked literature first. Hemingway, Plath, the way men wrote women as prizes or punishments. He laughed when she quoted Sylvia, "Every woman adores a fascist." Then the conversation turned personal. "My wife thinks I'm grading papers tonight," he said, voice low. "Truth is, I needed air. Needed someone who listens." Sienna listened. He told her about the teaching assistant last semester, the late-night office hours that became something else, the guilt that followed him home like damp footprints, how he still read bedtime stories to his girls while smelling faintly of someone else's perfume. Tears welled. He wiped them with a cocktail napkin. She touched his hand. "You want to stop lying?" He nodded. "Come to my place," she said. "We'll talk. No pressure." Her apartment at 10:47 p.m., she poured him tea, chamomile, laced with nothing yet. They sat on the sofa. He kept talking. More names, more nights, more apologies he never said aloud to his wife. When his eyelids drooped, she suggested he lie down. He did. She waited until his breathing deepened, then retrieved the small vial from the medicine cabinet, phenobarbital she'd acquired months earlier from a pharmacist who owed a favor. She dissolved 2 crushed tablets into the dregs of his tea, tilted his head, poured it slowly down his throat while he slept. He never woke. She waited 2 hours to be sure. Then the scarf again, silk, familiar now. 1 loop, pull, hold. 5 minutes this time. His body fought longer in sleep. She removed the ring, added it to the cedar box. 7 now. Dressed him in his coat, carried him to Riverside Park at 3:15 a.m., propped him on a bench near the 72nd Street entrance with an empty flask beside him. Drunk teacher freezes overnight. Tragic. Seasonal. She walked home through the empty streets, snowflakes catching in her hair. The next morning, Annabel Reid bought every major paper. Buried on page 12 of the Times, teacher found dead in Riverside Park, apparent exposure after heavy drinking. No ring mentioned in the article, but she called the precinct covering the scene, asked about personal effects. The desk sergeant checked. Wedding band missing. Wife says he never took it off. Annabel hung up. 5. She pulled the witness list from the earlier cases. One name kept surfacing in vague statements. A tall woman with dark auburn hair seen talking to Brenner at McSorley's. Another witness at the Dead Poet remembered a woman in Burgundy laughing with Frost. A bartender at the Oak Room thought he'd seen someone similar with Kane. Descriptions matched. Not exact. Hair up sometimes, down others, but the eyes. Pale green. Sea glass. Annabel opened the reverse directory for bars within a 10-block radius of the deaths. Cross-referenced with library employees in the area. 1 hit. Sienna Lorenzo. Librarian. East 78th Street walk-up. Changed her name legally in 1981 after a divorce. Divorce. Cheating husband. Annabel leaned back in her chair. It was thin. Circumstantial. But the hairs on her neck stood up. She requested a surveillance detail. Quiet, unmarked car on 78th. Told no one yet. Not until she had more. Sienna, meanwhile, sat at her kitchen table that night. Cedar box open. 7 rings laid out like coins on a grave. She ran her fingers over them, feeling the weight of broken vows. She opened her planner. No circle this week. Something felt off. A prickle at the back of her neck when she walked home. A car idling too long on the corner. She closed the box, locked it, pushed it deeper under the bed. The city kept producing liars. But for the first time, Sienna wondered if one of them was watching her back. Part 6. The ring she couldn't bear to sell. April 3rd, 1984. The unmarked Ford Granada idled 2 blocks down from Sienna's walk-up on East 78th, exhaust curling into the damp spring air. Inside, Detective Annabel Reid sipped lukewarm coffee from a styrofoam cup and watched the 4th-floor window. Lights on at 7:12 p.m. Off at 11:43. Same pattern 3 nights running. No visitors. No unusual movement. Just a woman living quietly in a city that never slept. Annabel had pulled the DMV photo from Sienna Lorenzo's license renewal 2 years earlier. Tall. Auburn hair. Pale green eyes that looked straight through the camera like they already knew your secrets. The bartender at McSorley's had nodded when shown the picture. Yeah, that's the one who talked to Brenner. Quiet. Polite. Left with him. Same story, different bar, different witness. Thin threads, but they were starting to knot. Sienna felt the eyes on her. Not paranoia, not yet. Just the prickle of being observed, the way a deer knows the hunter is close before it sees the scope. She varied her routes home, took cabs instead of walking, kept the cedar box under the floorboards now, not the bed. 7 rings, 7 silences. She told herself it was enough. She told herself she could stop. But the itch returned on April 11th. The bar was P.J. Clark's on 3rd Avenue. Crowded, loud, safe in the noise. He found her first. Lucas Montgomery had been a mistake, too close to home, too public. She'd sworn no more teachers, no more fathers, but this one looked different. 49, corporate lawyer. Name tag on his briefcase, Harlan Voss. No, wait. Harlan was the first name on the monogram. Last name, Voss. German roots, probably. He wore the ring tonight. Thick platinum band, no engraving visible. He ordered a scotch, neat, and sat 2 stools away, watching her in the mirror behind the bottles. She let him come to her. "Rough day?" she asked, when he slid onto the stool beside hers. "Rough decade," he replied, voice low, accent faintly Midwestern under the polish. "You look like someone who understands rough decades." They talked for 90 minutes. He told her about the long hours, the travel, the wife who waited in Connecticut with their 2 boys. How he'd started seeing a junior associate because the house felt empty even when she was in it. How he still called home every night and lied about loving her the same. Tears didn't come. He was too controlled for that. But his voice cracked twice. Sienna listened, felt the old heat rise under her ribs. "Come to my place," she said at closing. "We'll finish the conversation. No strings." He paid the tab, followed her cab in his own car. Her apartment at 1:08 a.m. She poured him bourbon, good stuff, the bottle she kept for special nights. They sat on the sofa. He kept talking. More details, more betrayals. She let him kiss her once, hard, desperate, then pulled back. "Close your eyes," she whispered. "Trust me." He did. She retrieved the vial from the kitchen drawer, same phenobarbital, fresh supply from the same pharmacist, dissolved it into his glass while he sat with eyes shut, head tipped back. He drank without question. 20 minutes later, his head lolled. She helped him to the floor. The scarf came next, silk, worn soft from use. 1 loop, pull, hold. His body jerked harder than the others, fought in the haze of the drug. She braced her foot on his chest, leaned her full weight. Face purpled, eyes rolled back, tongue protruded. 6 minutes. When it was done, she removed the ring. Heavy, cold already. She held it to the lamplight. Inside, to H from E, always. She almost put it back. Almost. Instead, she carried it to the bedroom, opened the floorboard, added it to the box. 8 now. She dressed him, carried him down the service stairs, drove his car to Central Park near the Bethesda Terrace, propped him on a bench with an empty flask and a half-smoked pack of Marlboros. Overdose or exposure. Either way, another sad headline for a family man. She walked home, felt lighter, felt finished. At 4:47 a.m., she didn't notice the Granada pull away from the curb 2 blocks down. Annabel had seen the silhouette leave the building at 2:19 a.m., carrying something heavy wrapped in a coat. Seen the car pull out. Run the plate. Harlan Voss, registered to an address in Greenwich, Connecticut. Wife named Elise. 2 sons. She tailed at a distance, watched Sienna position the body, watched her walk away. Back at the precinct by dawn, Annabel laid it out for her lieutenant. 8 dead men, all married, all missing rings, all last seen with a woman matching Sienna Lorenzo's description. The lieutenant stared at the board. "Get a warrant," he said. "Quiet, no media. We want the box she's hiding." Annabel nodded. She knew what was coming. But she also knew Sienna wouldn't stop unless they stopped her. Sienna, back in her apartment, sat on the edge of the bed. Cedar box open. 8 rings laid out in a perfect circle on the quilt. She touched each one. Felt nothing. For the first time, the power felt hollow. She closed the box, pushed it under the floorboards, locked the apartment door with both deadbolts. Outside, the city woke up. Sirens in the distance. Another day of liars walking the streets. She told herself she was done. But deep down she knew the next bar was already calling. And somewhere, a detective with tired eyes was writing the affidavit that would end it. Part 7. Cedar box full of widow's tears. April 12, 1984, 5:47 a.m. The sky over Manhattan was the color of old nickel. 2 unmarked cars rolled to a stop half a block from Sienna's walk-up. 4 detectives, Annabel Reid among them, stepped out quietly, vests under dark jackets, sidearms holstered but ready. No lights, no sirens. The warrant had come through at 3:12 a.m. after a judge read the affidavit in his bathrobe. Probable cause, pattern of homicides, witness identifications, surveillance footage of a woman matching Sienna Lorenzo carrying a heavy bundle from her building the night Harlan Voss's body appeared in Central Park. Annabel led the way up the narrow stairwell. The building smelled of yesterday's cooking and old radiator heat. At the 4th floor landing, she nodded to the RAM team. 1 solid hit. Door splintered inward. Sienna woke to the crash. She was already sitting up in bed when the flashlight beams cut across the room like knives. She didn't scream, didn't run, just raised both hands slowly, palms out, the way she'd seen in movies. "Sienna Lorenzo," Annabel said, voice flat and tired. "You're under arrest for the murders of Kyle Brenner, Darius Frost, Eldridge Vander, Orson Kane, Lucas Montgomery, Harlan Voss, and others we're still confirming. You have the right to remain silent." Sienna listened without blinking. Her eyes, pale green, sea glass, met Annabel's and held. No fear, no surprise, just a small, almost polite nod, as if she'd been expecting them. They cuffed her behind her back, led her down the stairs past neighbors peering from cracked doors. She kept her head up, coat thrown over her shoulders by one of the uniforms. No shoes. She walked in bare feet down the cold steps. The apartment search began immediately. Annabel went straight to the bedroom, kneeled beside the bed, pried up the loose floorboard with a pocket knife. The cedar box came out first, small, polished, smelling faintly of incense and old paper. She opened it on the quilt. 8 wedding rings lay inside, arranged in a perfect circle on black velvet she must have added later. Each one glinted under the crime scene lights. Engraved insides visible. Names, dates, promises carved into gold and platinum. Annabel's stomach turned. She cataloged them one by one, gloved hands steady. Kyle's plain gold band, Darius's with the tiny sapphire chip, Eldritch's thick doctor's ring, Orson's engraved to O from P, Lucas's simple teacher's band, Harlan's heavy platinum to H from E. Two more she didn't recognize yet, probably the early ones, the ones they hadn't linked. Beside the rings, a slim stack of Polaroids, faces of the mistresses, hotel receipts, a few torn pages from day planners with circled dates and bar names. In the closet, they found the silk Hermes scarf, still knotted loosely from the last use, faint discoloration where skin had pressed against fabric, blood flecks too small to see without a microscope, but enough for the lab. The Olivetti typewriter sat on a shelf, ribbon still in place. A test page pulled from the wastebasket matched the suicide note from Kyle Brenner. Same uneven pressure on the lowercase e. Under the sink, in a locked cabinet, small vials, phenobarbital, diazepam, a few unmarked capsules, enough to kill quietly. A coil of garden hose in the hall closet, matched the type used in Darius Frost's carbon monoxide setup. Annabel stood in the middle of the living room while uniforms boxed evidence. She looked at the single lamp still burning on the side table, at the half-empty bottle of bourbon from last night, at the empty teacup on the coffee table. Sienna was already in the back of the cruiser when Annabel climbed in beside her. "Why the rings?" Annabel asked quietly. No recorder, just two women in the dark. Sienna stared out the window at the waking city. "They took something from their wives," she said after a long silence. "I took something back." "You killed them." "I stopped the lies." Annabel looked at her profile, strong jaw, calm eyes. "You think that makes it justice?" Sienna turned then, met her gaze. "I think it makes it equal." They rode the rest of the way in silence. At the precinct, Sienna waived counsel for the first interview, spoke clearly, calmly, admitted to the 6 they had solid links for, described each one in clinical detail, the confessions extracted, the methods chosen, the disposal. No remorse, no glee, just fact. When they pressed about the other 2 rings, the ones without names yet, she shrugged. "Old debts," she said, "paid long ago." The DA's office moved fast. Indictments by end of week. 8 counts of first-degree murder. No bail. In the holding cell that night, Sienna sat on the thin mattress, knees drawn up. She closed her eyes and pictured the cedar box. Pictured the widows opening their mail, reading the headlines, touching the pale circles on their own fingers where rings used to be. She smiled once, small, private. Then the lights went out. Outside, Annabel Reid filed the last report, stared at the evidence list one more time. Rings, scarf, typewriter, vials, photos. Enough to bury her 10 times over. The widows would come to the trial. They would cry. They would testify about the nights their husbands came home late, smelling of perfume and guilt. And somewhere in the courtroom, the cedar box would sit on the prosecution table, open for the jury to see, full of tears no one had asked for, full of promises no one had kept. Electric Chair for the Faithful. October 17th, 1990. The courtroom on Center Street smelled of polished wood, old paper, and the faint metallic tang of fear that never quite left the air in these places. Number 1 Center Street, Part 47, Supreme Court of New York County. The people of the state of New York v. Sienna Lorenzo. The gallery was packed. Widows mostly, dressed in black or navy like they were attending 8 funerals at once. Meredith Frost sat in the front row, clutching a tissue that had long since shredded. Penelope Kane beside her, eyes dry and furious. Claudia Vander stared straight ahead, fingers laced so tightly the knuckles showed white. They had come every day for 6 weeks, listened to every detail, watched the cedar box sit open on the prosecution table like an accusation no one could look away from. 8 rings, 8 photographs of smiling husbands who never came home. 8 pale circles on 8 left hands that would never wear gold again. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Victor Lang, stood before the jury for his closing. He spoke quietly at first, almost gently, then let the volume rise with each name. Kyle Brenner told his wife he loved her the morning he died. Darius Frost kissed Meredith goodnight and promised he'd be home early. Eldritch Vander wrote prescriptions for his patients while writing lies to his own wife. Orson Kane bought Penelope flowers the week before he met the defendant. Lucas Montgomery read bedtime stories to his daughters the night he never returned. Harlan Voss called his boys in Connecticut and said, "I love you," before he stepped into her apartment. Lang paused, walked to the evidence table, lifted the cedar box with gloved hands, opened it. The rings caught the overhead lights like small, cold stars. "She took these," he said, "not as trophies of victory, as proof of justice she invented in her own mind. She forced confessions. She silenced lies. But she did not silence the pain she left behind." He set the box down. "She is not a vigilante. She is not a healer of broken vows. She is a murderer, 8 times over." The defense attorney tried. He painted Sienna as a woman shattered by betrayal, Tony Moretti's desertion, the years of quiet rage, the trauma that twisted grief into something lethal. Temporary insanity, diminished capacity, a cry for help no one heard. Sienna sat motionless at the defense table, hair pulled back, pale green eyes fixed on the jury box. She wore a simple gray dress, no makeup, no jewelry. She never took the stand, never apologized, never explained beyond the taped confession she'd given in April '84, "I stopped the lies." The jury deliberated for 11 hours. Guilty on all 8 counts of first-degree murder. No recommendation for mercy. Sentencing came 3 weeks later, November 9th, 1990. Same courtroom, same widows. Same cedar box, now sealed in evidence bags. Judge Harlan Whitaker, gray-haired, voice like gravel, read the sentence without flourish. Sienna Lorenzo, having been found guilty by a jury of your peers of 8 counts of murder in the first degree, I hereby sentence you to death. The sentence shall be carried out in accordance with the laws of the state of New York. Execution by electrocution in the electric chair at Sing Sing Correctional Facility. A soft sound escaped the gallery, half sob, half exhale. Sienna did not react. She looked once at the widows, met each pair of eyes, nodded once, small, almost courteous, then looked forward again. Outside the courthouse, reporters surged. Flashbulbs popped like gunfire. Annabel Reid stood on the steps, coat collar turned up against the November wind. She watched Sienna being led to the van in handcuffs and leg irons. Their eyes met for a second across the crowd. No words, just recognition. The appeals dragged on for years, standard procedure in New York. But the evidence was ironclad. The typewriter ribbon, the scarf fibers, the phenobarbital in the vials, the rings with fingerprints, the confession on tape. Execution date, March 14th, 1995. Sing Sing's death chamber. Old Sparky waited. Wooden chair, leather straps, wet sponge, the hood. Sienna walked the Green Mile at 11:07 p.m. She wore the standard issue jumpsuit. No last words offered. Just a final glance at the warden, then the straps. At 11:12, the switch was thrown. 2,000 volts. Silence after the first jolt. The newspapers the next day carried the same headline: Ring killer executed. 8 husbands avenged? The widows read it in different kitchens across the city. Some cried. Some stared at the pale band on their finger and felt nothing. Annabel Reid clipped the article, tucked it into a file drawer labeled Closed. Then she went home to her own quiet apartment, poured a glass of bourbon, and sat in the dark. The city kept producing liars, but for a while, at least, the bars felt a little emptier. And somewhere, in a cedar box locked away in evidence storage, 8 rings waited, silent, heavy, forgotten by everyone except the widows who still touched the empty space on their hands. The faithful had paid, the unfaithful had paid more, and the scales, tilted, broken, but balanced at last, finally rested.